The 119th Congress is going to be returning from their August district work here in just a couple of weeks. And there's still a lot that needs to be done to advance a conservative agenda. But one of those items that is on top, or at least near the top of the items for the House of Representatives Republicans, is going to be getting to the bottom of the events that took place on January 6, 2021. And in particular, to counter the 117th Congress that was led by the Democrats and what they did with their January 6th committee. So what questions about that day will this new iteration of the January 6th Commission tackle? Well, joining me now to share more about this is Congressman Barry Loudermilk. He's a member of the House Administration Committee as well as the Financial Services Committee. He represents the 11th Congressional District of my home state of Georgia, and he is author of the brand new book entitled Then They Prayed, Moments in American History Impacted by Prayer. And Then They Prayed, an outstanding book, which we'll talk about here before I let Barry go. But Congressman Loudermilk, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
It's always good to be with you, Jody. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing, but we sure do miss you in the House.
Well, thank you. I miss all you guys, too. So please send my love to the Georgia delegation and to others. All right, Barry, let me ask you. You have been tip of the spear, really, on this whole January 6th investigation from the very beginning. And you were one who started uncovering things early on. So let's go back. First, remind our audience what the most important details were that you've uncovered, especially prior to President Trump taking office for his second term.
All right, Jody. Well, it was a challenge. I mean, we spent the majority of 2 years trying to find documents relative to the investigation that Pelosi's committee supposedly did. As we started digging into the investigation, it was revealed to us through some documents we found that the Select Committee on January 6th turned over would reference other documents we couldn't find. And that put us on the trail of there's missing documents we have here. And so we spent about 80% of our time trying to relocate documents that have been sent elsewhere. For instance, there were transcribed interviews and depositions that were House property. Their documents that were owned by the House of Representatives were sent to the White House for archiving. There was others that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security, both in the executive branch, and these are House documents. We also hired a forensic team to go through hard drives that were turned over and found out there were over 10,000 deleted documents. And about short of 200 of those were unique. In other words, we didn't have copies of those documents. And so, but through the diligence of our staff and my committee, we kept digging until we started uncovering these documents. We were able to get copies of these documents or read them, as called in camera, at the different agencies. And what we found out is there was a predetermined narrative by the Select Committee on January 6th. Is that they were going to lay the blame for all of this at Trump's feet, regardless of what the evidence showed. And that's what they did. But the issue was there was more evidence showing that Trump was not a participant. He didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he had actually tried to prepare in case there was protests that got out of hand on January 6th. But that was the evidence that was hidden. And so basically they didn't keep anything that didn't support their narrative. And so we found out that, yes, on January 3rd of 2021, Donald Trump ordered the National Guard to be ready for deployment. We also found out that the Pentagon purposefully held back the National Guard for 3.5 hours after the request was made. We found out that Nancy Pelosi turned down most of the requests for the National Guard until there were shots fired in the Capitol. I mean, the list goes on and on. We also uncovered that certain witnesses were pressured to change their testimonies. Some, in my opinion, committed perjury. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There were documents that were claimed to be written by one individual. It turns out they were actually written by others. And basically, what we found out was there was a big whitewash over this investigation. Again, they wanted to lay it at the feet of Donald Trump. And when they couldn't get the evidence to support that, they manipulated some. They basically people changed their testimonies. And they came out with this narrative, never thinking that anyone would actually work this hard to uncover the truth.
Wow. And in the midst of all of that, and there's been a lot of obstruction that you've had to overcome, all that sort of stuff, but you also had some whistleblowers that came forth with some pretty valuable information. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it was the whistleblowers that really helped us the most. Let's just take the Department of Defense. If there's any agency that is difficult to get information from, it is the Department of Defense. But we had 4 senior officers of the D.C. National Guard. One of those was active duty Army at the time, had the courage to come forth. And what had happened is there was a 3.5-hour delay that once the National Guard was approved to deploy, now this is after the Capitol had already been breached, it was 3.5 hours before they were given the order to deploy. Now, because President Trump had actually ordered them ready to deploy 3 days earlier, they were dressed in riot gear at the Armory, ready to go. And but the Inspector General for the Department of Defense ran an investigation, and they reported that the National Guard, well, they just weren't ready to go. That's why there was a delay. But these 4 individuals, there's actually more, but we had 4 that were willing to come public, and we did a public hearing on it, that basically said that the Department of Defense is lying. And we pressured the Department of Defense IG enough to where they handed over to us the 44 depositions that they took in their investigation, which totally dispelled the IG report, is that it was false, that the Pentagon, senior officials in the Pentagon purposefully held back the National Guard. Quote, some of them said we didn't want to send them over until the violence was over. But they are known as the guardians of the Capitol. Their job was to come and quell riots and out of control protests. That's what they existed for. But people made political decisions, not operational decisions that day. And then what resulted was cover-ups. People covered up their misguided intentions. Some of them covered up their failures, but a lot of what we ended up doing was uncovering the cover-ups, and we were just really penetrating deep into where some of the other problems were, even with the pipe bomb. I mean, there were so much strange things that happened with the pipe bomb and didn't happen with the investigation that we weren't able to get to those until the previous Congress ended.
Well, Congressman Loudermilk, I know you've been on top of this for a long time, and it's obvious that you are passionate about this. You are a man of integrity, and we are grateful that you are right in the midst of dealing with this whole issue without prejudice. You're trying to get to the bottom of it. You are also a man of deep spiritual Christian faith. And before I let you go, I want to personally thank you. This is an outstanding book. And Then They Prayed, Moments in American History Impacted by Prayer. Real quickly, we've only got about a minute or so left, but what prompted you to write this? And by the way, it's perfect timing with the upcoming celebration of our 250th birthday. But what prompted you to write this?
Well, as you know, Jody, our founders referenced divine acts of providence, especially during our war for independence, that at times God just divinely intervened on our behalf. But my dad was a World War II veteran, and he used to tell me these incredible stories that happened throughout our history. And while there were several books written on divine providence in our founding era, I couldn't find any that actually chronicled acts of divine providence throughout our history, even up into the 20th century. And so that's what prompted me to write it. We actually originally released it in 2010, and it sold very well. But we wanted, with the 250th anniversary of our country coming up, people are asking, can we go another 1, 2, 10, 20 years? I believe we can go another 250 years if we look back and we learn what sustained us for the first 250. And it was a reliance on God and his providence, and his providence still acts today. In fact, the first pre-release copy I gave out was to President Donald Trump. I was at a meeting with him in the Oval Office talking about January 6th investigation. And I handed him the first copy. And I told him, I said, Mr. President, I want to give this to you. This is a book about divine providence in American history because you are the recipient of an act of providence. And he immediately pointed to his ear and he said, Barry, if God hadn't had told me to turn my head at that moment, I wouldn't be here. And so we still see these acts of divine providence playing out today.
Congressman Barry Loudermilk, thank you so much for all that you do. And again, I want to encourage folks to get a copy of this book. It is outstanding. I am thoroughly enjoying it.
And Jody, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. God bless.
Thank you.